Good morning, boys and girls. Well, if it's not morning for you right now, then tough cookie. So this morning we're gonna start with we just transition. There we go. This morning we're gonna start with endgames. So we are continuing on our path to looking at what kind of endgames we get from the Sicilian Dragon. Okay, so again, this book is called Mastering the Endgame Strategy Volume 1? What? No, it's just Mastering the Endgame. There we go. Volume 1, yeah. So what they do in the book is they look at a bunch of different openings, standard openings, things that you get regularly, and they look at the kind of end games that you can get from them. So on the board you'll see we have the dragon. This is a fairly standard dragon up until this point. Here there has been many attempts played. Off the castle, moves like bishop e6 usually comes to mind. Um, sorry, rook b8 has been tried. I think there's been ideas of queen a5, of course. a5 has been played. e5 is. Okay, e5 I guess is just bad because you will lose the pawn on d6. So yeah. Bishop d7 has been tried because they want to play a rook, some rook, not a rook, some rook to c8, of course, and play knight e5 and knight c4. It's a general idea, trying to trade off one of the bishops from white's side. So what we're looking at, of course, is the pawn structures that you end up getting. This ties in nicely with the middle games that we are doing, where we are looking at the pawn structures in the middle game to see what our plan should be. Okay. I'll keep it from white's side because white actually does win this one. So this is, I guess, the kind of pawn structure you do not want for black, or depends obviously on what pieces you end up having on the board. Okay. So here black played bishop e6, of course. So you'll see bishop e6 is played, king b1, and now black played the mistake of playing queen a5 in this specific variation. I just want to go back real quick. They also talk about bishop c4. So, and in the book, they asked. The players are players are called Averbach is the white player, and Bent Larsen was playing black here. So when they asked the players, he didn't particularly like bishop c4 because of d5. Apparently this pawn sacrifice is quite playable. Now, I didn't really delve into it. Obviously, we'll probably come along this line eventually because, we are doing dragon games, so I'm sure we'll get to it eventually. Okay, so he castled instead. Bishop e6 was played, king b1, and queen a5. Now, the reason why queen a5 is a mistake here is purely because of the endgame that arises from this position. So, I shall show you now the moves followed. Apparently, the better move, by the way, would be knight e5. So, probably the kind of idea that I was looking at. Knight takes e6, pawn takes e6, f4. Knight g4 with bishop c4 would be a line. Just trying to see what would happen here. So we still have the same pawn structure as we would have in the game. But there would be a slight difference because white would not have the bishop pair, which is what he gets in the game. And of course, this is not an endgame yet because the queens are still on the board as well. Okay, let's go back. So after queen a5, now we play knight takes, pawn takes, and bishop c4, sorry. And he has to defend it. The only real way is knight d8. Is there a move like d5 possibly? He's got 3 defenders, we've got 5 attackers, so I guess not. Maybe there's any tricks on b2 or c3 for us anywhere? Doesn't really look like it, does it? So I don't think d5 works. That's why knight d8 is now forced. And after knight d5, you are forced to trade off queens. So now, obviously, we have to take this queen, and of course, knight e7 is not a threat. If he plays knight e7, then we can just play king f7, and you'll end up losing the knight. So that would not be a good move for white. But white just wants to get into a pawn endgame. So after queen takes, knight takes f6, and bishop takes. Of course, you can't take with the pawn. If you take with the pawn, then the d6 pawn falls. What's going on here? Oh, sorry. So yeah, so if you take with the e pawn here, let's just show the variation. We might as well. It's check, of course. So if you do take here, after this d pawn will become a very, very easy target to go for, because you can't play knight f7 because your knight is protecting the e6 pawn. So this pawn would be lost. So you can't play pawn takes, and if you play rook takes instead, variation, after rook takes, we do have threats again now with bishop coming here. Maybe we can maybe even double here and play e5 in variation, so you gotta be careful. But in general, we'll end up having the same pawn structure as we have in the game. So this is the pawn structure that we are looking at. Ooh, let me just grab my tablet real quick. I get so involved with this stuff that I completely forgot to just open up my my chat on Twitch. So let's quickly pop in on the chat in Twitch. I use my tablet for it right now because I don't have two screens. If I had two screens, it would be great because, you know, obviously I'll try and get another one extra at some point, because, you know, of course, then you can have chat boxes and stuff on this side, and you can have your normal screen with whatever you're doing on the other screen. So the highlighted pawns, that's the pawn structure we're looking for, and of course, it's very important here that white has. I got messages that white has the bishop pair. Okay, because the bishop pair here is very strong because it's an open position. You can see that the bishop pair has a lot of squares. This bishop is doing a great job. Sorry, that went completely wrong. And then this bishop is also doing a good job. So definitely they are doing a lot of work here. You can see this rook is passive, this knight is passive. It's not looking great. We do have the semi-open file for our rooks as well, which we are going to occupy. Let me just quickly go into the chat. There we go, connected. Okay, so he takes bishop takes, and of course rook takes, and now he plays bishop e5 to stop any ideas of us playing e5 ourselves, or even f4 to get more pressure. We want to play f4, f5 if we could. So here we can stop real quick. It is white to play. I think this is where they... Let me just look at the book real quick. Up a little. And yes, it is white to play now. And white plays a good move. I'm just trying to see why. I'm just trying to see why it's a good move. Oh, it's the wrong place. I mean, just in the book. I'm looking at the wrong position in the book. Okay, so apparently this is not... Okay, so he plays rook d3. Sorry. I mean, just... Not quite sure why. Okay, maybe because he can target pawns. You know, these pawns could become very weak very quickly. So something like rook a3, if a6, bishop b6, attacking the knight that is defending the pawn on e6. So that's definitely a possibility. So after rook d3, rook c8, attacking the bishop. Bishop drops back to b3. Of course, now there is no more such threats as rook a3 from white. b6 gets played. Bishop d2. Not quite sure why. I'm interested in why bishop d2. I guess the bishop moves there because it wants to stop Any ideas of why bishop d2 though? Maybe he wants to be able to play something like bishop c3 if bishop f4 gets played. The other reason, by the way, okay, so now I can go back a little bit here just to show you why rook d3 gets played, because he wants to protect the f3 pawn, because he wants to play g3 and f4. Okay, so now it makes sense as well why he moves away the bishop. So the bishop moves away in order to be able to play g3. Okay, because now the rook is defending the f3 pawn. So that is one of the big reasons. Now, the reason why this endgame is bad, okay, first of all, we know about pawn islands. So we know that he has 1, 2, 3 pawn islands versus only our nice, clean 2 pawn islands, okay? The other reason is because of the passivity of his pieces, okay? This bishop is quite nice, okay? Not a bad piece, so we'll leave that one out there. But this knight is not great because it's stuck defending a pawn, okay? And because of the knight being on the back rank, these two rooks are not connected either. So they are kind of playing a different game with each other here. So all white wants to do is start pushing for g3, f4, f5 possibilities if he can. Okay, so let's see how he does this. So after bishop g2, we play g3. Now the king moves to g7 because he wants to obviously get out of this pin, okay, and hopefully eventually be able to get to move his knight. It's the game plan. So now after g3, he's got the small problem where he has to move. Does he have to lose a pawn now? It looks like he does, doesn't he? Okay, he has to play bishop f6 now because, of course, g4 is being threatened. F3 is being threatened just with a tempo. So, okay, I guess it doesn't really matter. So bishop f6 gets played, h4. So what does white do now? Okay, this rook is stuck on the queen side. It's not going anywhere. Can't get to the other side of the board. This knight is stuck defending this pawn. Not great either, okay? He's going to have to play something like e5 if he wants to finally free this knight. But if he does, then this bishop becomes extremely strong on this diagonal. Okay, so our logic here is that we basically have all of these pieces plus all of these pawns to play on the king side. So this is what we want to do. We want to open up the king side and use our extra rook and piece at this point to obviously attack black's king. Okay, so let's see how he does this. So h6 gets played. Okay, not quite sure why. Rook f1, because now he obviously also wants to double up on the f file. He wants to play f4, rook f, and f5. This is the game plan. Game plan would be f4, rook goes to f3 and f5. Makes complete sense because we just want to take over the open file. So this rook f1 is a kind of prophylaxis. Okay, so for those of you who don't know what prophylaxis is, it is where you prophesize what is going to happen in a game. In this case, we prophesize that the f file will open, so he makes ready by putting his rooks on the f file already in order to have control over the f file once it opens. So rook c7 gets played. I mean, you can see how helpless black is. Black has no active plan. And what do we say about if your opponent has no active plan? Then all you do is slowly build and increase your advantage. Slowly go for it. There's no need to go nuts. There's no need to go sacrificing, unless of course there is a concrete variation to do so and you win material or obviously win the game, etc. So white just slowly continues. So now f4 gets played, perfectly fine. He plays h5, trying to blockade all the pawns on the white squares. Play rook f1 like we wanted to, because f5 is now the threat. He finally plays knight c6, trying to get his knight free, sacrificing a pawn as well. So I just want to see why. Oh, of course, so he doesn't sacrifice the pawn immediately, because if we take here, he can play knight to there, forking the rook and bishop. So he's still indirectly defending the knight. Let me just refresh the chat here. So after that, he plays c3. Okay, Note that this bishop is no longer ever going on this side. This bishop is now focused purely on this side of the board. Especially after f5, then the bishop is going to become strong. Okay, so c3 he can play. Now, another reason why c3 is not bad at all is because after c3, this knight obviously has less squares, and of course this rook has nothing on this semi-open file, even if he brought the other rook to c8. So that does make complete sense. So after that, he plays e5 now, so he commits himself to allowing this bishop, this beautiful diagonal. Also, there's two really nice squares as well for the bishop. So of course we wanted to play f5, so we're going to play f5 because this pawn structure now is becoming really, really bad. Everything seems to just play itself now. Black plays knight a5. We don't want to lose the bishop pair, so the bishop goes to d5 because that's the best square for it right now. So everything just plays itself. Knight c4 gets played, and he just drops back with the bishop. Bishop c3. This knight does nothing here. This rook is now stuck defending this knight forever, unless the knight's going to come back. So Black seems like he's making progress, but he's not, because the progress that he's making has got no bearing on the game. Why? Because we're playing on the king side. We still have this, and this all playing on the king side. All of them are still hitting the king side. And you can see that these two pieces are on the queen side and they cannot help defend. So this endgame seems to just kind of plays itself as long as you slowly but surely continue on the side where you are better. So black tries, he plays b5, and now white crashes through here with g4. So if he doesn't take, the rooks are going to penetrate on the g file. So he's kind of like in a bit of a messy mess one because he can never play his rook to g8. So we're just going to take over the g file if he does not take. I guess we can even just open up everything. We play pawn takes g6 and pawn takes h5 after that as well, with both rooks coming in. Rook coming in to f5 and the other rook coming in on g file, and then eventually a checkmate on h5. So something like there, 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 and there. That'll be just decisive. So he has to take the pawn, and now just rook g3, nice and simple. If you take with the pawn now, then that's a good question. What do we take back with? If he takes on f5, do we just take back with the pawn? Or do we take back with the rook? I would suspect that we just take back with the rook, because again, there is this whole mating net idea with rook takes g4 and rook h5. Yeah, that looks pretty devastating. So he cannot take on f5 because of rook takes f5 will create a mating net. Okay, so he plays rook h8, makes complete sense. The pawn on h4 cannot be saved, but it doesn't matter, of course, because we're going to get that one and that one. So rook takes g4, rook takes h4, and rook takes g6. Now the king has to go to h7. Can't go to f8 because of mate. That would just be a mate. So, and on h8, guess it's perfectly fine to go there as well. But it wouldn't change the position that ends up arising. So, king h7. Now bishop g8 is played because he wants the king on h8. Okay. Now I ask, what would be a good move right now? And this now makes sense as well because, again, okay, we still have this on the king side. Okay, we have these pieces playing on the king side. He only has this one and this one defending on the king side. So all we want to do is we want to make sure that he cannot get in more pieces. Just have a look at how long this has been taking. Well, it doesn't really matter, of course, but you know, because I'd like to take obviously a decent amount of time on these things, but you know, sometimes they're not that hard. In the beginning, I don't think the whole point of this book was to not be it too hard, to just show you what can happen in the endgames that you get from the openings that you play. And this is important. You know, a lot of players, I feel a lot of players, they play openings, they play things because they know the theory, they know the first 20 moves off by heart. but they don't understand why that 20 moves get played. So here it's trying to show you, by knowing what kind of endgames you get in these openings, you already have so much more from your knowledge point of view, not just the theory. Now you know that, hey, if I get this endgame, this is what I'm supposed to do. This should be an easy endgame win, etc., etc. Now, it doesn't sound flashy, I mean, usually when we think about the dragon, it's all gung-ho sacrifices, gung-ho attack on both sides of the board, but that is sadly just not how chess works all the time. So, have you guys found a nice move for white here? White wants to ensure that these two pieces never get into the game. So he just drops back with bishop e6, protecting this square so that the rook cannot get back to the fight. Well, it has to take a long route now to get back into the fight, to get to the king's side. Okay, he plays knight b6, so he's finally trying to reroute the knight now as well. And now, what we want to do is, we want to trade off as many of his defending pieces, because then we just end up having attacking pieces that he has not. He's got nothing. So we want to trade off this piece for one of our rooks, of course. This bishop on f6 is basically just a big pawn, so we don't need to trade off for that one. So he plays rook h6, rook takes, and pawn takes, and bishop takes. Now the rest kind of just plays itself. What does black do? There is a mating net idea again now, with bishop f8 and rook h1 checkmate. So this just shows you why we end up wanting to trade off any of his best defenders, so that the extra pieces that we do have on the side of the board where we are playing suddenly becomes much more effective as well. So here again we have these three pieces, and he only has that one defending. So bishop f8, rook h1 is mate. Just in case you didn't realize that, because of course now the bishop covers that one, this bishop covers that one, and this pawn still covers that square. So the king has no way out. And now he can't bring in his rook to defend or anything like that. He can't. There's just no way to defend everything. Shame. Poor guy. Poor guy. What if he played knight d7? Okay, I want to look at knight d7 now. So, new variation. So what if he plays knight d7? Oh, I see. Well, you just play rook h1. Now what does he do? Because bishop f8 still mate. So the knight tried to stop the bishop from getting to f8, but now, of course, we just have a discovered checkmate. There's no way to stop that. Nope, no way to stop that. You can't block with bishop g7, because then just bishop g5, or bishop anywhere for that matter, but bishop g5 will just end up losing the bishop. So something like, if he plays there, we play here, now he has to block here, we take it again, and now he still threatened bishop f8 mate. So that doesn't work. So there's no way to stop the mate. So now we understand how desperate his position is. Black played knight, black played rook to to c4. So the reason for that is, now you don't have this idea anymore. If you play bishop here now, then he takes on e4, and if you check, he can block with his rook. So that is the idea. But of course, after rook c4, we just take the rook, and the rest is pretty much elementary, my dear Watson. Elementary, my dear Watson. So knight takes. The knight still has no good squares. I mean, this bishop is just dominating it. b3 gets played. Just shove the knight back. Knight goes back there. Bishop comes here, attacking the pawn. Knight goes to c6, and we just now obviously cut off the king. Yeah, this is not going anywhere. Rook g1, just cutting off the king. a5 gets played. a3 gets played. King there. King, and now the king just starts marching up the board. So maybe a4, and then after pawns, the king goes here, here, and of course just comes in and finishes off the game. So the a4 gets played himself. b4, knight goes back. Rook goes to d3. Okay, so this to d1. So this has changed a little bit, but it doesn't really matter, of course. Now in this position, after he fixes his pawn on b5, like that, now we can just go after the pawn because there's no way to defend the pawn. So because he can't get a knight to that square because the bishop still attacks that square as well. So not very good for black here. Black is completely lost. So after rook d1 he resigns. He ends up deciding to give up the game, of course, because after rook there, I mean the rest is easy. Black's king is still hemmed in, by the way. There's still nowhere to go. Can't come forward. Nothing to do. King is useless. So he's still down that piece as well in the endgame, and we all know how strong a king can be in the endgame as well. Okay, let me just go back. So this all stems from the fact that black's pieces are completely uncoordinated. His bishop on f6 looks good, but it's not really doing much. It's a big pawn. His knight on d8 here is just stuck there because it has to protect the e6 pawn. And his rooks are not supporting each other because of the knight on d8. I just want to show you, after a move like this, it just shows you, obviously he understands that this file might open. Okay, if not, then another file might open, but it doesn't matter if the G file opens because he knows that when it does, his bishop is most likely going to be free on that square. So black's pieces cannot get into the G file. So this is why he doesn't mind this. But a move like this, rook to f3, it just shows you how hopeless black's position is. Because if you have the time to make such slow, small, building up moves, then it shows you that your opponent has no counterplay. And if your opponent has no counterplay, it's much easier to just build up slowly and win a game. I find so many players try and push things. They try and push the envelope, like I say, and the books that we are busy with right now as well, they keep on saying the same thing, that if your opponent has no counterplay or conceivable plan in the near future, then you can just continue slowly building up your position. So it's a nice game. The knight finally gets free, of course, because he can't take on e6 because of the fork on d4. So white just blocks the knight out. Now he plays e5, he plays f5, attacking the pawn structure on the king side. Knight goes there, bishop to d5, just a beautiful outpost for the bishop. Knight goes there, and the bishop on c1 just drops back. Because the bishop on c1 is only eyeballing the king side, and it has no interest on the queen side. So after b5 was played, g4, now obviously we're just opening up the position. So let's just run through this. Takes the pawn, takes the pawn, takes the pawn, king has to go there, bishop check there, and bishop e6 to prevent this rook from coming into the game. This rook is not coming into the game or helping any kind of defense here. And after that, he plays swapping off the only rook that is defending the king side, and of course now you can see the mating net that I have created here. So rook h1 with bishop f8 is the threat. So he has to play rook c4. It's the last ditch effort because of course if you try now to play rook h1 or bishop f8, then check, then he can block with the rook. But of course we just take his rook. And the rest is semantics. Cool, guys. I hope you guys have seen my video that I posted about donations and just obviously following the Twitch. So if you are not a follower and you happen to see this video, then please just come and follow me on Twitch. It's basically like subscribing on Twitch. Because like I say, it's all about just numbers. If we have thousands of followers, then of course, the percentage of people that do donate will be fantastic then. Thank you guys so much. I will see you all in about, well, a little while. About an hour and a half. Then we will do, I think it's the middle game section next. Yes, the middle game section. So our next middle game we will do and continue on with the book Chess Strategy for Club Players. Cool, guys.